Hi, welcome back and thanks for watching again. My name is Nady TO. So today we're going to be taking a look at this guy right here. It is the Guyatone TO-2 tube overdrive. So for those of you who have been following my channel for quite a while now, you may remember that I did a video on this pedal several years back. But the quality of that video wasn't all that great, and I don't have too many playing samples in that video. And also the mod that I did for that video was a very simple mod where I just changed or added a switch to change the clipping diodes within the circuit. So for today what I wanted to do is I wanted to mod this pedal so that we can get some good overdrive tones without relying on any type of clipping diodes. And so I wanted to keep it sort of a pure tube overdrive and have the overdrive and the saturation and the clipping come just from the tube itself and not by using sort of maybe a little gimmicky feedback clipping diode setup that we have originally. And so we'll go into the schematic and we'll talk about what I did to make this pedal have a little more gain and to be able to clip the tube itself. We're going to look inside the pedal. I'll show you the inside because it's really cool, and we'll take a look at some of the voltages going to the tube so you can see that it's actually a true tube preamp instead of something like a starved plate design. And then we'll look at the schematic and I'll talk about the mods that I did to this, and then after that we'll do the loop tone comparisons. By the way, this pedal has a predecessor to it, and it is the Guyatone TD-1. The TD-1 is very similar to this, except for it doesn't have the bass and treble knobs. It just has a single gain knob and a output level knob. That pedal also has a slightly different clipping circuit to it. I've actually never owned one, so this is just information that I read on the web. But the clipping isn't really a feedback loop, but more of a hard clipping to ground. So that's a little bit different in the TD-1. And then the TO-2 we have here has the bass and treble knobs, and the clipping is also changed to a feedback diode clipping going to the cathode of the first half of the 12AX7. And I believe this TO-2 was also sold as a Nady. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but N-A-D-Y, Nady TO-2. And so that is, again, the same pedal as produced by Guyatone, sold under a different name. So anyway, let's take a look inside and see what's going on inside. And again, please share your thoughts in the comment section below. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. Okay, so before we go into the schematic talk and talking about the mods, I first want to take a look at the pedal itself. And so let's start with the top view, and this is your input and your output, and you have two dual concentric knobs. So this is your gain, and this outside would be your level, so your output level. And same goes with your treble and your bass. I haven't really measured the exact taper of the pots themselves, but from what I can guess, these are both dual concentric 1 meg audio taper pots. And this is just my personal guess, but I think they're trying to cut costs on ordering and purchasing parts, so they bought just a bunch of these 1 meg audio taper pots, which works great for the gain knob and the level, but is probably not the ideal value for the treble and the bass. And so they figured out a clever workaround to make a 1 meg audio taper pot work as a treble knob and a bass knob, but it's not your ideal setup. And so if you've ever owned one of these, you'll notice that on the treble knob, from 0 to like 9 o'clock, there's probably not much of a change, and then right between 9 and 11 there's a huge amount of increase in treble, and then after that you pretty much have no change in the treble. And so all the action sort of happens between 9 and 11, maybe a little bit into 12, but mostly right here, and then nothing over here and nothing over here. And for the bass knob, you have no change going from 0 to 12, maybe even into 1 o'clock, and then right between 1 and 3 o'clock, huge increase in bass, and then nothing over here as well. And so over here you have a power switch, and so that turns on the internal circuitry to fire up the tube and gets it ready to go. And then with the foot switch you can turn the pedal on or off, and it's a really dim LED. I don't know if you can see that. Anyway, so let's flip it over and crack open the back. Okay, so I already have, so there are 4 screws in the corners. I already had those removed, so let's take a look inside. Okay, and so you can see that there's quite a bit packed into a small little package here. And so this is the transformer that's going to supply the voltage for the tubes, and that goes into this little board here, which is the power supply board. And then you have the tube right here, obviously, and underneath the tube is where all the circuitry is for the overdrive itself. And this is a little switch that I've added. If you watch my previous video, I talked about this mod that I did, and what it is in the down position, it's going to be your stock setting with the silicon diodes in the feedback loop, and in the up position it's going to be LEDs instead of silicon diodes, and in the middle position this is going to illuminate the diodes all together and make it into a pure tube preamp type circuit. So for today we're mostly going to focus on the tones with the switch in the middle, so with no diodes whatsoever in the circuit. And what I want to do is, we have this powered up, and so I want to measure the plate voltage and the power supply voltage. So I'm going to plug this into the chassis here, so that's ground. And this red lead is going to go to the plates, and so this is going to be the voltage coming off of the power supply. Let's see. That's 258.8, so that's 259. So yeah, let's say 259, roughly 259 or 260 volts coming off of the power supply. That's going to the plates. And then once it passes through the plate resistor, if I can, this is going to be a little bit scary, but here we go. Okay, so there it is, 184 volts on the plate itself. Okay, so there's a 100K plate resistor right here, and after it passes through that, the actual voltage on the plate itself is going to be 184 volts. So you can see that it's very much a sort of a true tube preamp circuit, and that's pretty much it. It's a very simple circuit, as we'll see in the schematic, and I think that it's really cool that they managed to cram everything into this little box. And anyway, so let's take a look at the schematic, and we'll go over what's going on here, and then I'll talk about the mods, and then we'll listen to the back-to-back comparison tones. Okay, and so we're looking at the schematic here, and this is the schematic in its stock form. And so this is how the pedal was originally before I modded it, and you can see the clipping diodes at the bottom here. But let's first remove those clipping diodes, and this is what we get. And this is very much just a simple 12AX7 or any dual triode preamp. And so we have 2 triode sections, and that would fit into a single dual triode tube. And very much like a Tweed Champ and the early Princeton amps, and then I think with a modern amp, something like a Valve, an Epiphone Valve Junior is a single 12AX7 preamp. But any type of amp that is really simple and only has one dual triode in the preamp is going to look something like this. And so by removing those clipping diodes, we are able to make a true tube preamp. And what I want to do next is I wanted this circuit to have enough gain so that it's the actual tubes that are clipping and not the feedback clipping diodes creating the overdrive tones. And so to get that, I need to have a lot of volume going into that second triode stage. What we have here is in the first section, that's your typical triode section, and it's going to amplify the signal coming in. And then after that we have the gain knob, but that's essentially just a volume knob. The gain knob is just controlling how much signal goes into that second triode stage. And so even when we max this out, in the case of the stock pedal, it's still going to stay relatively clean. And that is because right after the gain knob and the bass knob, there's a voltage divider right here. And so there's a 470K and a 220K, and that's going to cut down the volume even more. So it's going to sort of quiet down the signal before it goes into the second half of the 12AX7. That is going to sort of tame the overall volume and then make it into a cleaner signal. And so what I've done is I've changed the values for these resistors so that it's now a 100K over a 470K. And so that's going to keep a strong signal going into that second half of the 12AX7. And then also I added a bypass capacitor to the cathode of that second triode. And then so those two changes alone are going to give us tons more gain into that second triode section. And the other changes I did are just to change the sort of the frequency response or the affected frequencies of the treble and bass knobs. For my personal taste, and this is just my personal taste, I didn't like the way the frequency response was with these values. And so what I want to do is let's pop up a frequency response curve with the stock values for those capacitors. And so if we're to tweak the treble and bass knobs to get what might be a nice frequency response, it looks like this. And so you can see that the peak of the treble is right around 2K, maybe a little bit more than that. And there's sort of a flat section in the middle, in the mid-range, and then it cuts off on the bass. And that, I guess, is a good frequency response. But for my personal taste, I wanted something not with a crazy mid-hump, but more of a slight mid-push there. And so with the values that I've changed, if we were to tweak the bass and treble knobs to another good sounding position, it would look something like this. And so the peak of the treble is in a more sort of a comfortable place, and we have a slight mid-hump or a upper mid-hump, and then it slowly tapers off smoothly into the bass region. Personally, for my preference, this is more of a usable tone, and I like this better. And so that's why I changed those capacitor values. You can leave those stock if you want. The other thing I did was to change or remove this 470K resistor completely. This resistor does two things. First thing it does, it creates a bass cutoff RC filter in combination with that 0.01 microfarad coming off of the plate of the first triode section. And also the other thing it's going to do is it's going to mess with the sweep of the gain knob. And so the gain knob is a 1 meg audio taper pot, but because we have a 470K resistor across the lugs of 1 and 3, which are both ends of that pot, it's going to change how the resistance changes as we sweep through the pot from 0 to maximum. And I didn't really see much of a reason to have this there, because I didn't see a huge reason to have that bass cutoff, and I definitely didn't see a reason to mess with the taper of the gain knob. And so those are the main mods that I did to the pedal. Okay, so now let's go into some back-to-back loop tone comparisons. And as you'll hear in the comparison, even with the changes to the voltage divider and the cathode bypass capacitor, you still can't get a whole lot of gain from just one single dual triode. And so if this was a Tweed Champ or a Princeton or a Valve Junior, you'd have your power section after this. You'd have your power amp section after this, and so you'd have your power tubes, and so this preamp section driving those power tubes is what's going to really create that overdrive saturation, and then added to that is going to be the output transformer saturation, and then obviously the speakers as well, to create that nice overdrive that you'd get from something like a Tweed Champ or an early Princeton, or a Valve Junior. So yeah, you definitely notice that with something like a Strat or a low output single coil, you aren't going to get a ton of overdrive, even with the gain maxed out. But it still works as a great overdrive pedal, and I really like the results here. And so please let me know what you think in the comment section below, and I hope you enjoy the schematic talk, and I hope you enjoy the tones from this pedal.